Questions we asked you back in May, but you know the question is coming.
Yeah.
What's happening at that middle line?
It's a true competition, and everybody is putting their best foot forward. There's going to be growth opportunities in there as far as how that goes. Again, I'm going to go back to what I said in the spring. You have a player that manned a position for 5 years, and I don't care what position it is. And there was a lot of reps that we need to build to get to the level we need to. And the guys are doing everything they're supposed to do to get to that level. There's going to be, I always talk about we're doing one of two things. We're either growing or we're dying. We're never staying the same. So it's okay to die a little bit when it comes to your game. That's okay as long as the next day you build on it and there's growth.
Do you feel like at this point it's pretty much between Tyrell and Terrell? Like, is it mostly between the two of them?
Right. And I know there was a question to Coach McDermott about kind of the rotation and how we're going. And right now, just to echo what he said, we want to see a little bit more Tyrell and Terrell. Again, try to be the position coach and say Tyrell versus Terrell. But that's just where we're at right now, and that's not an indictment on Balin by any means. He's getting plenty of mic reps. Are they all coming with the ones? No, but he's getting the repetition load that's needed where he can prove himself just as well as Tyrell, AJ, all those guys.
How well are Bernard and Dodson showing command of the system and communicating?
Could you say that one more time?
How well are Dodson and Bernard communicating the scheme to the
Right, I think the best thing is it is growing every day, which is exactly what we need to see, right? I'm going to go back to it again. There was a guy that stood in front of the huddle for 5 years, and the repetitions that they got weren't necessarily in front of Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, Tre'Davious White, Taron Johnson. That's a lot when you look over there and you see that quality of player and you're in charge of the huddle. So there is growth there for sure. I know they take a lot of pride in the command and the operation of what we do, as I've talked about before, and they're growing every day, which is great to see. And we've got a little time before September. Now, we want to see growth we'd rather see growth at an exponential rate than a slower rate, and I think we're getting there. I believe we're getting there.
You said you have until September, but how soon would you like to make this?
The sooner the better. The sooner the better. And like I said in the spring, it will show when it's ready to show. And we have complete faith and trust in what we've done. The benefit we've had is we've had the same system for 7 years. Obviously, Sean's calling it this year, and he's manning the defensive coordinator, but it's always been Sean's system. So we know we have the scars, we have the successes, we have all that stuff of all those things that we know what we're looking for, and that's between us, obviously, and we know when it shows itself, we'll be ready.
How has Dorian come along in his first camp?
Yeah, Dorian's come along. Even going back to, and this is not an indictment on Tulane. I know there's a lot of people out there saying things on Tulane. College football is a lot different than NFL football. Okay, so you think about having to go to class. You think about trying to get a roster of 90 people ready to execute when their time comes, because you never know. College football is a lot different. There's a lot of different protocols and things like that. So a lot of times what you find is that game is a little bit more simpler, if that makes sense to you. So what Dorian's biggest hurdle has been is the complexities and the details that we ask, and we ask at a high level, right? Sean talks about playoff caliber. We don't let little things slide, not that Tulane did. But he's made tremendous strides. And what I talked about in the spring was obviously his physical tools are there. It's how can we get him to play the fastest he can possibly play to affect the game in a positive way for the Bills.
Follow up on Dorian. When you went to New Orleans before the draft and working out, what did you want to see from him, and did you see it?
I knew, me personally, watching the tape what he could do physically. I wanted to see his mental processes, his ability to follow instruction and drills, his ability to get on the board, and me to put him to the fire on teach him defenses for the Bills that he's never heard before in his life, and erase everything and make him teach it to me, and put him through exercises of, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? What do you do here? What do you do here? And he showed a mental capacity. And again, we don't have a ton of time with him. So you're talking about a training camp install versus an hour and a half to 2 hours in a meeting room. You can imagine what the difference is as far as what we're able to go through with him in a meeting room setting pre-draft versus where we got him now.
Yeah, Bobby,
for me, it was like huge, or person. Are you a little concerned that you do lack some size? I mean, Dotson's 237, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, him, Bernard, Dorian, these guys are not big. Is that a concern in the middle of that defense?
Yeah, and I'll go back to what I said in the spring. A physical player is a physical player. An athletic player is an athletic player. Think if you look at the NFL now versus, I don't know, call it even back when all our great Hall of Famers were playing, right? It was a different game, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, but we were the ones that that K-gun kind of started transforming the game. Well, we're at a place now, we're evolving to where you guys see it, the game's played in space. The mobile quarterback's a big deal. So what comes with mobile quarterback? Quarterback run game, RPO, all those type of things. You have to be good enough and athletic enough at linebacker to be able to play in space, but you also got to be physical enough to be able to play when they want to shrink you down and they want to butt heads in a run game. You got to be physical enough to do that. So where I'm going with that is, like I talked about, to me, it's about the right player at that position. It's not what they look like. It's the right player at that position. I totally understand where you're coming from, but there's a mix right now that we feel you need where you have to be athletic enough and you have to be physical enough. And I think we have the right guys to do that.
Along those same lines, how much are you seeing Taylor Rapp in your group? Because you saw him at the Rams. He did a little bit of that.
Yeah.
That linebacker quasi rover role. Are you getting him in your group?
Right now, Taylor is a DB. He's got plenty to learn too. Remember, he's coming from the LA Rams, which is a completely different system. So right now he's a DB. Down the road, maybe we talk about it, maybe we don't. But he certainly is a very good football player and is physical, as you guys have seen. But right now, Taylor Rapp's a DB.
How much does Matt Milano's presence help the guys who are competing and just kind of knowing the defense and being able to, I don't know, maybe clean up is not a good term,
Yes.
coach, but you understand what I mean.
Yeah. So you guys know Matt, right? He's a man of many words. So I believe that the biggest thing with Matt's not going to say a whole lot. Matt's evolved in this system. If you guys remember back, Matt Milano wasn't always Matt Milano. There was a patience with him. There was a calculated way that we were approaching Matt Milano back when my dad was here and to what he's grown into. And I think with Matt, the biggest thing is, like, you guys know, you're never going to hear him. He's not a rah-rah guy. He's going to be very intense on game day. But what guys, they want to be Matt Milano. They want to have the success that Matt's had. So Matt's success and the way he plays the game and the way he impacts the game in a positive way for us really speaks louder than anything Matt could ever say. And his attention to detail and his knowledge of our scheme has grown a lot. So he can give a little something here, a little something there to guys. But guys want to play like Matt. Guys want to have the success that Matt's had, and Matt puts in the work. Matt wants to be great. And they see that in individual. They see the way he executes our defense. They see how physical he plays. They see how fast he plays. They see we talk about we got to make plays. That's what we have to do at linebacker. In the end, you could be where you're supposed to. Are you making plays? Matt Milano makes plays as of, up to today. And I think that's the biggest impact that Matt has on our group in particular.
How important is the first preseason game next weekend in terms of the evaluation?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge for all our guys. I mean, obviously, you guys know games are games, right? I mean, practice is practice. And our goal is to practice so hard and straighten ourselves so hard that the games are easy. So, obviously, on game day, practices are to make mistakes. We don't want mistakes in games. And mistakes are going to happen, but we want to be able to play free and play fast. So, obviously, all these games are going to be critical in evaluation of every player in the linebacker room.
What sort of evolution are you having personally? Second year now at the position group, different position group than you started before. What are you bringing different, maybe, and what did you learn to carry into this year?
That's a great question. I guess I haven't had time to really think about my evolution, but I would say that my eyes are faster now to know what they look like. For me to sit here and say when I first moved to linebackers, I'd be like, quit looking at the secondary. You know what I mean? I mean, my whole life, I went from having eyes on the back and in practice standing way in the back so I could see the whole picture to where now I'm closer to the line of scrimmage, and I need to be able to actually see true interior run combinations and things like that. So I think I've just grown to be more comfortable, and I'll say I'm quicker. When you talk about young guys that are battling for a position that don't have reps, I had to build reps. You know what I mean? And I had to become quicker with my thought process. And, hey, not only what is the scheme, but what's the profile of this player and how do we defeat that player when it comes to block destruction? You know, so I would say that's the biggest thing as far as my evolution is becoming faster in the way that I kind of process what our offense is doing, because we're a reactive defense, right? Defenses all react to what the offense is doing. So I have to react quicker.
And Bobby, the way this offense uses tight ends, how good of a challenge for your linebackers to get ready for the season?
I think anytime you can have a player on offense that can go in line and block a defensive end, and he can split out and route up a DB linebacker, I think that's a challenge, right? We all know when you play the elite receivers of the world where they're going to be, right? They're going to be split out, and normally they're going to be matched up on a DB. Where tight ends, it's a little bit trickier. It's a little bit trickier because they're in line. Are they going to block? Is it a run? And then do we have to react to play action where they're probably getting a little bit cleaner release than a corner that's pressed on that elite receiver, if that makes sense to you. So anytime at any position you can have versatility in what you're able to do, that creates issues that causes defenses to have to handle those things.
Bobby, can you explain the strategy and the benefit behind the battle for this middle linebacker job, having one guy take most or all the first team reps every day, as opposed to, like a guard, Osiris and Bates going into the drill? What's the reason for that?
So that's a great question. So early on, when you guys think about it, so we've talked about we want versatile linebackers, right? Well, the mental aspect of it early on, specifically in the spring, in this fall, the thought was, okay, player X can focus on this position and this position only. So we're putting them in the right mind frame to, okay, this is what I lock in on today. Because I don't know if you guys noticed, but if you're not going with the ones, we mix and match. We want versatile linebackers. You got to be able to play both, and we talked a little bit about that in the spring. But wanted to give that player, when it was his day, a little bit of an advantage to be able to focus on that position specifically.
Okay, Bobby, do you anticipate both Terrell and Tyrell getting time on Saturday?
Yeah, we haven't. That'll be up to Sean. That whole rotation, I'll obviously have my ideas. That's Sean's final say. We haven't talked about that as of today, so we'll have something, and you guys will see it on Saturday.
Have you seen from Tyrell specifically, like, growth going into the season? Like, how have you kind of seen him take on this battle and this real chance to start? Like, what have you seen him change in himself?
Yeah, I think Tyrell, and correct me if I'm wrong, is he in his 5th year? I think he's in his 5th year. I'm terrible with the years. Yeah, I didn't even know how long Tremaine was here in the spring. But I think once you hear an install, for instance, let's say it's defense X, you've heard that install 10 times, you're naturally going to become a little bit more comfortable with it. You guys have seen he's been in games, he started games, played full games, and that growth and that command, although it still has to grow in that operation that we talk about all the time with our Mike linebackers here at the Bills specifically, I think there's just a lot more comfortability. Anytime you're comfortable in a job, you're comfortable in an interview, you're probably going to be a little bit freer, a little bit more to flow, a little bit less stiff and rigid. So now you can just go play ball. And I would say the same thing about Terrell. I mean, Terrell's a quick study. I think Beaner said it, didn't he? Like, Balin and Terrell walked out here like, whoa, this is a whole different year. Like, we feel so much freer because that's the way our system is, and we can't slow down for anybody. And we have to cater to the Jordan Poyers of the world. We have to cater to Micah Hyde, Von Miller, and all those type of deals. So, and also to our offense. We have to get the ball back to 17. That's what we have to do, and we know that that's a big deal for us, is taking the ball away and getting it back to 17.
You just mentioned Dodson playing games, in games.
Yeah.
What's the biggest difference for him, difference between playing games and playing a season?
That's a great question, and that's what I've thought about, and that's a whole different ball game, right? You preparing yourself, okay, I know I'm the backup at this, and I'm getting ready primarily for special teams. My job this Sunday, primarily as we stand right now, is to be the best special teams player that I can possibly be. So there's going to be an adjustment. there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be all the things that you saw with Matt, that you've seen with other players in the past that we've gotten early, and you let the scars happen. Look, and I said it in the spring, failure is the best teacher. It is the absolute best teacher. Success is an awful teacher. You start to get, there's a lot of comfort and content in success. So failure, adversity, tend to create that urgency and that level of response that you need. So there's going to be growing pains. We could sit here and say players are going to be perfect. None of our players that have started for 7 years are going to be perfect. But we need to limit and really decrease, as we need to see growth as we go forward and see the decrease and of those mistakes that potentially could be made. My job right now is to put them to the fire to make sure once we hit our first game that those failures are limited.
You mentioned Sean earlier. Obviously, you've been around him so much, but with him officially taking over the defense, like, have you noticed any changes or anything like that?
No, Sean, like I said in the spring, Sean is, and I hate to keep saying what I said in the spring, but it's the same thing. Like, I've seen Sean from when I believe he was first a coordinator in Philadelphia, and he kind of came up through Philadelphia, kind of like I've done here a little bit with him in Carolina. To see him become such a great leader in the fact of delegation, putting trust in the assistants, being vulnerable and asking us what we think, and hey, is this the right thing, what I'm doing here? That to me is a sign of a great leader. Anybody can get a title and sit up there and say, this is how we're going to do it in this, but to allow people to grow underneath you and really have a say in what you're doing, that creates ownership. And that's what he does with our players, with our veteran players. That's what he does with the coaches. And not that he didn't do that in Carolina, but there's no insecurities with him. There's no insecurities, and it's a lesson I think all of us can learn from.